cost build up were presented
the percentages of total cost, just to give an indication which items carry the most of the weight. We have direct costs, and then we have indirect costs, which we call in total admin expenses, which are then we attempt to allocate across. In terms of our discussion here, what is important to note, without repeating over and over what the other players have been saying, is to say that in our economy, the impact of foreign currency exchange rate is quite pervasive, because operators do tend to factor in. This was also compounded by the adjustments to the fuel pricing, which comprise a significant part in terms of the operations. Also to state that ICT is a heavily capital intense industry, and one of the fastest changing sectors, so there is a need to keep on investing. So because of this huge capital intensity, most of the equipment that we procure actually ultimately is imported, and so this has got a knock-on effect in terms of the costs that are there. Yes, the labor expenses are the least perhaps affected, but if we look around, we can begin to see the pressure for increase in terms of wages, which is also a response to just the inflationary pressures that are around. In terms of infrastructure sharing, we are sharing infrastructure. I think there is is it a unique or different model of sharing that is around? It's what is the industry is imposing on us, where you going for direct swapping of equipment in terms of towers, in terms of ducts, and also they are essentially commercial arrangements. You pay for, if you are not offsetting, you have to pay commercially. So we pay to other operators, and they also do the same to us in terms of that. Perhaps the difference that is crept in, that has come in with the legislation, is that Potras has now the ability to intervene in terms of the fairness or otherwise of the prices that are being charged. In terms of coverage, Mr. Chairman, I refer you to map 1. Our major physical infrastructure on the ground comprises fiber optic cable that is strung on top of pylons, power pylons. We have 2 major routes, Harare to Bulawayo, and then Plumtree, and then Harare to Mutare, and then into Mozambique. The fiber optic cable, we could refer to it as backbone cable, gives us the ability to carry huge traffic for our other players and our customers. We also have presence in most of the towns, as is indicated by the red squares. You will note that we do not have fiber coverage today, so we are actually leasing from other players in the sector. The quality of service for our products are as indicated in table 6. The pressures on quality of service, which we are measuring in availability, a lot to do with the ability to procure components as and when required service the network, to maintain the network as it is. And as I alluded to yesterday by the Reserve Bank, and I did say that the approvals are given, but the issue is to do with the small cake. So we have not been receiving as much forex as we would require for maintenance of a capital intense network as ICTs. I will move on to the future, to the projects that are there. A case in point, Mr. Chairman, is the first project where for a good part of last year we were supposed to do an upgrade of the radio technology. The committee has previously heard that LTE is the fourth generation. It used to be the latest, but there is now a fifth generation also. But this upgrade was really crucial. We had 2.4 million in the bank. We have obviously suffered exchange rate risk to the fact that this 2.4 is now trebled in terms of requirements, and still yet we have not been able to access the forex for this key project. The second project, DWDM, is actually a countrywide fiber optic cable using the very same power lines that we're talking about, and it's a later technology than the technology that is existing. The subsequent to the upgrade to LTE, which is your mobile sort of network that you're talking about, your radio network, we're supposed to expand our base stations by 250, and those are the capital requirements that are there. Let me just talk very briefly in terms of the challenges and also the assistance that Parliament can afford us. It is a fact that foreign currency is an issue in such an industry that I've mentioned. If there could be a re-evaluation or reprioritization in terms of the role, the enabling role that telecommunication studies have been done as well as, very way back, indicating that for nations, ICT development, there's positive correlation between ICT development and GDP, that is national development. So we do feel that if there could be prioritization in terms of allocation of forex, then it would help us as a country as a whole. One of the major challenges that we've been having as Powertel has been to do with funding. For the two projects that we're talking about, we have managed to agree to get vendor financing, which entails the person who would have won the tender to actually source the funding. We are optimistic in terms of the impact that will make on our ability to raise funding. Mr. Chairman, I will stop there and be directed by the questions where I should spend more time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Maybe we want to acknowledge the presence of visitors, the students from Excel College in Chifunza, who are on a tour of Parliament. You are welcome. We are currently having an inquiry into the mobile data sector as we check the charges. I'm sure you students will also be very much interested to know that your parliamentarians are also worried about the cost of data, cost of communication. So that is what we are doing here. So we are interacting with the service providers. This is Powertel. We just finished with Minimini Telecom. So you are welcome. I think let's now open this session to questions. If one of our members have questions that they want to pose
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On table number 7, where the comparison of product pricing with the different
Page what?
page number 7, page 6 or 7.
Page 6 or 7.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. What I thought that was supposed to be under implication of benchmarking, where we are trying to compare our pricing model here or our cost compares to how it compares to other players in the region. So, but I got confused when I looked at this table because it doesn't look like it's comparing like with like. I thought if I'm looking at Telecoms SA, say it's BP and Metrolink up to 10 mega BPS, whatever. We have the figure there, then we have the different players' figures and also our Powertel figures, so that we'll be able to compare. Or maybe I'm not understanding, so that's the clarification that I want to see how to read this, or how useful is this table to our tribe.
Yeah, I think you are correct. We want to benchmark their products with similar products in the region, so maybe they would have to respond to that. I'll take another person.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank the CEO and his team for the presentation. I just wanted to understand a couple of issues. Number one, if I look at your report in terms of your optic fiber backbone coverage, I'm only seeing that you have Harare to Plantu, which goes via Bulawayo, and then Harare to Mutare. Given the presentation that we received earlier on, where a private player, Liquid, has more than 20,000 kilometers of fiber that is already laid, what is the problem of Powertel in terms of expanding its backbone, bearing in mind that it is a unique relationship? It is part of the same group with the Zimbabwe Electricity Transmission and Distribution Company, which has thousands and thousands of power pylons established across the country. It is acknowledged that it's cheaper to deploy fiber over the power pylons than it is to dig. One would have expected that by now you would be the largest backbone company in this country. Why hasn't that happened? That's number one. Number two, we were also told that Liquid, as a result of its deal with ZETDC, is offering to ZETDC in terms of its
since then has been the issue of funding. As things have developed, also now it is transformed into foreign currency as well. But that is the major issue. The plans that we are implementing, that we have on the cards, are plans which have been there on our desks for quite some time. So in short, that is the issue. As I've also alluded to in terms of the WTM and LTE expansion, we have
more extensively attempted to use vendor financing, whereupon the vendor is the one who raises the financing. I think issues that also arose in terms of raising financing are issues to do with country risk, as well as perhaps the challenge of raising funding for a telecommunications player within a power utility kind of environment. In reference to Liquid offering service to ZTTDC, where we have coverage, we are offering the same, I believe, I'm not exactly the deal that they have, but we are giving them fiber cores which they have used and are using right now where we have coverage. In terms of strands, if I heard you well, Honorable, the strands provided to ZTTDC by Liquid as a result of their arrangement, we, maybe let me check. To date, we are not using any of those at the moment. If I can move to the third question. The interventions that we are using in terms of keeping our quality of service high in spite of the absence of the local providers. For some of our vendors, where we've gotten our staff trained through working with them when they come to fix the faults. So for some of the faults, we are able to provide the necessary engineering interventions. I think we are. I may also need to echo to say that we produce some of the best engineers in the region, if not in the world. With a lot of challenges, they are able to innovate and come up with solutions, as it were. In terms of infrastructure sharing, better way of infrastructure sharing. Our understanding basically for infrastructure sharing, I believe elsewhere in the world, is that there would be no conditionalities, because if we have got fewer base stations than another operator, then what it means is we're going to run out of base stations to swap. So we should be able to share those base stations, in spite of the fact that we don't have as many base stations as another operator. And how that is done is that we get charged a competitive price to list those base stations. Thank you, Honorable Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Honorable Chair. You indicated that you have got the best engineers, if not in the world. Your colleagues here say the same thing. But we now, as a country, have a problem with foreign currency. We have those best engineers. What is constrained in Because I suppose that manufacturing is actually an engineering knowledge which we already possess. What are the constraints?
Thank you, Chairman, for the second cherry. My question is on page 1 of 7. Chairman, I see a problem here. For the past 5 years, our total revenue in US dollar is started from 26 million and it's actually slightly gone down from 26.35 to 26.33, 5 years down the line. Yet if you look at the operating costs, they've continuously gone up. So my question is, what is the problem? Is there going concern issue, or do we have going concern when we are faced with such a situation where there is no growth in the revenues? And on the other hand, my other question is on the issue of competition. There was no reference, if you notice, even from the first presenter, there was no reference to the level of the competitive environment of this industry. Whether it's tough or not, you need to hear from them. So I need a perspective of the level of competition in the industry, and also what is our capacity utilization. Do we have excess capacity or we are fully utilized? And as I conclude, Mr. Chairman, I think, I'm sorry to say this, but I think there's a deliberate ploy by the MNOs to try and avoid the issue of benchmarking. Because if you're a global player, it is in your interest to know what other players are doing and how they are charging and how they are putting up their cost build up or their costing structures. But for all the players to say we need that to protract, I don't think it's a fair answer. I think we need a proper understanding why there is no motivation to try and establish what Zambia, Malawi, Rwanda, and all the other players in the region are charging. One will be tempted to want to believe that they are doing deliberately so that they put a necessary effect into their cost structure to try and justify an increase which should not be there. As we saw earlier on, that someone was actually putting the contrast, the license fee as part of the code. It's supposed to do that, yet that one is paid by the customers. So I think we need to get a proper answer on that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I think it's okay. Because this, but it's also in your interest to know what other operators in the region are charging. And when you go to contrast to justify why you should have an increase, I'm sure it's an interest you must have and you must use to justify your increase. So, for next time, when we request for information, we expect you to do a thorough job and present information. I think we gave you enough time to look into this matter. It's time to do nothing now. We'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Chairman. In addition to what Honorable Sabayan has just picked up, I'm worried about the static nature of the balance sheet of Powertel. From 2014 to 2018, the figures show as if the company is not existing. Revenue in 2014, 26 million. 2015, 26 million. 2016, 26 million. 2018, 26 million again. Is the company there or is not there?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, my question is just relating to what Honorable Gandawa and Honorable Sabaya alluded to. In 2017, there was an issue which was reported by the Auditor General. There was an issue of doubt about the Powertel's ability to continue operating as a going concern? Are there some turnaround strategies which you are now exploring for you to be a going on concern? Because it was reported in the Auditor General's report that there is a doubt for you to continue operating as a going on concern in it. The other issue, there was also an issue of you being unable to keep up payments of statutory obligations. How far are you now? Are you now able to pay your statutory obligations, or you are still having some challenges? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The effect of the maintenance support that was stopped due to non-payment, what's the effect on your provision of the service? And also, you came up with a very good innovation of vendor funding. Do you have any other places where it was used, and how successful is it? Do you have any other vendor who has been able to pay up front since you started it? Thank you.
All right, over to you, Powertel. Please, let's have the detailed responses. So to start, if we use with you, you are a public-owned enterprise. And we really expect much more from you. Over to you.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. The first question was to do with the observation to say that since we have very good engineers, why are we not going into manufacturing to invest so that we can earn foreign currency, if I heard it well. In general, businesses have mandates. I can interpret the question to say generally pertaining to the country, then that is a very valid observation. But in terms of our sector, competencies in running an ICT business do not necessarily translate themselves into competencies of running a manufacturing business. And even if that way so, one has to consider the mandate that the company is given to. But the observation is very correct to say that perhaps as a nation we have the necessary skills to go into manufacturing. The second set of questions, the second question, subset of the second question, is to do with the financials, the flat revenues. In telecommunications is a capital intense business. What happens in telecommunications, in fact, it's one of those industries where in real terms the price, the cost of services falls over time. What happens is, in terms of the technology, or in terms of the demand for data a few years ago compared to now, you'll find that it grows asymptotically. So it grows very steeply. So what happens is that you constantly have to invest in capacity because the unit prices are keeping down, are going down. Now, when you are not able to invest in telecoms plant capacity, because, which I think the comment also answers the second part of the question of competition, the ICT arena is highly competitive. Powertel is labeled as an IAP, which is an internet access provider, class A, which is supposed to be different from an MNO, your mobile network operator, and your Tel 1, your fixed operator. But over time, this distinction has become blurred because it's the same internet if we are talking about data. So you have all these players who are competing, and it's highly competitive. So if you are unable, as we have been, to increase the capacity on the ground through investing in plant, as we have indicated, then it means that we have to drop prices to match prices that are being offered by competition, and therefore this affects the revenue line. Because if you are going to drop your margin, you need to sell bigger volumes so that you are able to grow the business. In terms of interventions that we are putting up, I refer you to the table that we have been talking about in terms of future projects, where we are upgrading the number of base stations that we want to have from 65 to 250. We intend to upgrade the fiber optic cable by 3,400 kilometers with those projects, project costs as indicated. So that is the major issue, and it also, I think later on, somebody asked about, an honorable member asked about the static nature of the balance sheet, because there's been no investment. And our efforts are to do exactly that in terms of increasing the investment through finding innovative ways of financing. As part of the second question, I think I've answered about competition, but what is capacity utilization? Capacity utilization varies in terms of the different aspects of the plant. Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I can ask my technical director and engineer to...
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Basically, in telecoms, we've got 3 types of networks. You can categorize all the networks into 3. There's what we call the backbone, which will interconnect as we expand to the various areas nationwide. There's then the access network, where the customers connect directly. Then also you have the internet. So in terms of the backbone, we are at 65% utilization. But as we have said, we are also upgrading this to TWDM, which will cover the whole country. But still at 65%, we can also upgrade by buying more equipment. On the access trunks, we are at about 80%, but this can also be upgraded by adding more equipment. Then in terms of our internet, which will be carried via the internet, we have got capacity, we are just at 34%. So in terms of figures, the way we have configured our equipment at Powertel is that we looked at 2 things. Upgradability, we only buy equipment that we can upgrade as and when required. Then we also looked at forward compatibility. All our equipment can be upgraded to oncoming or future technologies. Thank you.
If I can continue, Mr. Chairman. As part of the second set of questions, we acknowledge the comments on benchmarking. We this is why we produced the table, point taken, but we just felt there was an authority to better able give more accurate figures as we were. So I think you can we can say, for instance, that fiber to the home in terms of Powertel is $55 and Telkom is charging less, Zamtel is charging much more, and BTC Botswana is charging more, and also another company, Kasane, is charging much more. In terms of internet, I think some of the issues were brought up when you benchmark with foreign countries. It's not all things being the same. This is why our emphasis is on cost. The way pricing is determined by porters in this country is they have a model called LRIC, long-running incremental cost model, which is cost-based. So the operator submits their costs. Porters puts these costs into a model and is then able to produce the services. But point taken in terms of benchmarking. There are various other issues as you cross borders that are different, the salaries, the costs of other things, and so forth and so forth. But so you would not be surprised that South Africa is charging a cheaper price than Zimbabwe, because there is an issue of transiting. As I explained in the earlier model, South Africa is able to access undersea cable directly because they have a coastal area. We are landlocked, so we come through other areas. Therefore, we have to absorb all those other costs that are there. The third question was to do with the static nature of the balance sheet, which I've attempted to respond to earlier, Mr. Chairman. The fourth question is to do with the going concern. I believe I've also tried to respond to that, to say we need to grow the company in terms of investing in the plant. When we do our models with those investments in, this Powertel is a very viable business. So we just have to unlock that particular area, and we are trying to do that as we have indicated. In terms of payments to statutory obligations, I will, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, allow my finance director to give an updated position.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Our latest position as Powertel in terms of statutory obligations is that we are now up to date with our ZIMRA payments, and we have come up with payment plans with Portras and our pension fund, and in terms of the payment plans, we are up to date. Thank you, Mr.
If I can. The last question from that batch of was from Honorable Chombo. It is on the two questions actually. Effect of non-payment, as we have mentioned earlier, this effect of non-payment, it means that the service provider withdraws their service. So this is where we're saying we've had to innovate and dig deep. And while we are chasing after the foreign currency, we do as much as possible the maintenance that we are able to do. And I believe this is a common scenario across the whole industry. In terms of vendor financing, the way we've been actually investing in Powertel, the plant that we have for the major pieces of plant, has actually been vendor financing in the sense, but it was not for these timelines. We're running, investing using working capital as it were, which is not the correct thing. What we're trying to do actually is from the onset, the supplier, the equipment supplier, because these companies, the manufacturing companies, OEMs or original equipment manufacturers, have got relationships with the financial institutions, so they are better able to attract financing than ourselves as Powertel. And I think, if I may also add, that the size of the balance sheet is also a determinant to, over and above the country risk, is a determinant to your ability to attract financing. So I may not have specific examples, but vendor financing is, I think, is used elsewhere. Do you have examples? Also in the world. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We don't have examples as to where it has been used, but it can be used successfully, and it's actually, I believe, being used also within Zimbabwe, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any question? I check that not having members of Parliament exhausted their questions. I want to thank you and your team for your presentation and for your time. Our apologies for keeping you here until last time. We are unable to offer you that. Your next time will come. We will offer you that. I think also in the same vein, we also want to request permission to come and your offices and your sites, so that we can also understand possibly the challenges that you are facing. And we are proposing, I think, that the first week or second week of May, we soon, because we are now closed for the holidays. So that's the request that we have from Parliament. But once again, thank you very much for your time.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, I would like to thank you, and through you, all the honorable members. We really appreciate the work that you're doing as a committee in terms of assisting the sector. We would be most joyful to host you when you come. I'm sure lunch won't be a problem. Thank you.